Minute one sounds great, actually.
Perfect. And we are live.
Hello, hello. Good morning.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Brandon.
Hello. How you doing today?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. I just caught up on some sleep. I spent the last few days in Vegas with my family.
Nice.
So yeah, doing well. How are you doing?
Good. Good. We're finally getting back into the swing of things. So, how's the family doing?
Good. My brother's actually in Asia for 2 months, so he missed this vacation, but he comes back like next week, and so
Oh,
very excited to hear how the trip is going.
yeah. What's he doing out there?
Um, yeah, just a few things. He's with his girlfriend. They went to 4 different countries. Right now, they're in Vietnam. The girlfriend is Vietnamese, so it's rather in family, but Vietnam's also super high on my list, and so I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to Vietnam. Can't wait to hear about it. Yeah, things on your side?
They're good. They're good. Um, it's felt like since I've been home from Europe, it feels like it's been one week after another of just there are no breaks, and that's okay. That's just kind of life right now. But all good stuff though. Like we were talking about before we got on the call. I left for vacation. I came back to my day job, and I had the first day back. I had 10 hours worth of meaningful work to do, which was I was perfectly satisfied to do. It was just makes for a long week. So
Absolutely. Where'd you go in Europe?
uh, everywhere. So for people who are watching this, I'm not some kind of jet setting rich guy. We had a bunch of family members who were graduating, and so we all kind of pulled our resources together and we flew out to Europe. We did five countries. Hold on. Because we went to Italy, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, and France. So 5 countries in 10 days.
See?
Um, and we hit some of the biggest sites that we had a list of things that we wanted to hit, and we got most of them. Um, we had to come home. I had to come home early to work, so I did miss seeing the Last Supper in Milan, which my parents and siblings went and saw. But
You'll go back someday. Yeah.
yeah, I'll go back for sure. I for all the like jokes I throw over at Europe, they have an insane history there. I mean, think of how many thousand-year empires
Yeah, right.
started and fell there, and that's never been heard of in human history since I don't know Rome, probably Holy Roman Empire. It's been over 1,000 years at the very least since we've had something on that grand scale that produced that much art and history and architecture, and so
Totally.
I'll definitely be
This
going back.
thing in Rome's crazy because everything's around you. It's something that's been there for like over 1,000 years. I know there's nothing like that in the United States. It it is pretty surreal, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and um, I don't know if you knew this, Brandon. I didn't know until we were there. So we started in Venice, and what I was unaware of is that Venice was a major empire for like 1,200 years because, and this is why I'm so nerding out over it. Aside from when we were there, I dragged all my family to the Jewish Quarter to see the first bank ever made. Um,
So, yeah.
but um, Venice focused entirely on commerce. It was their entire focus for 1,200 years, and it made them one of the most wealthy and powerful forces in Europe. Um, to the point where they conquered. I don't know if they conquered. They just became the suzerain of this place, but they conquered Constantinople after they spent themselves into oblivion fighting the Turks. Um, and it was because of some of the stuff we've talked about before. They had strong monetary policy. They never fought unlimited wars. It was all about trade.
So,
The only territory they took was to prevent pirates, that kind of stuff. And so
yeah,
I had no idea. And I had
that's
no clue.
I don't think I did either, but that makes all the sense in the world, right? Like focusing on commerce. That's kind of the thing that like when governments like strict the economy, like what do they
Mhm.
look at? Like, unemployment and GDP numbers, but Yeah, it's kind of that calmer. The more you can have people trade and exchange money, like the faster money moves, that's kind of best for the so-called economy, and it really does wonders. So sometimes
Right.
you will say how like war is good for the economy, and
Mm,
like, for like certain parts of like the economy, maybe like the war economy, but
mm,
in general, you don't want to be like in wars all the time because it's just
yeah.
destruction, and that's not good for.
Right. Well, so it's funny that you brought that up because right now I'm going through, um, because I'm a weirdo. I'm going through the certification process. I'm getting a certificate of completion for the 2025 lecture series for the Naval War College.
Fun.
Yeah. Random, I know, but the whole reason was because Dr. Sarah Payne teaches there, and I love her work. So I was listening through her lecture, and they said, "Oh, by the way, if you finish the lecture series, um, regardless of whether or not you're in the Navy, you finish the lecture series, you come to this website, we'll certify you, and you'll have this fun little certificate saying you completed the lecture series." So, um, but one of the things they talked about was just that point where what has made the world wealthy. They said since World War II, but I would say my experience in Venice has showed me that throughout all human history was expanding free trade. I mean, if you compare the Western world to, say, Russia or China or North Korea, um, you see the massive difference between these small economically. Or China's not small anymore, but these insular continental powers versus everyone else who's participating in the free trade system that we've built since World War II. It shows you just the massive difference in quality of life and wealth that free trade creates. And, I kind of disagree with a lot of the proponents on that now because they're saying, like, oh, basically it comes down to, oh, well, the US just needs to continue to foot the bill to make sure this whole system works. And I disagree with that on a fundamental basis. But they have a good point where so much wealth has been created since World War II because we stopped focusing on wars for expansion. We started focusing on trading with each other and making it as easy as possible.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
Part of the part of the idea of like, yeah, trying to would you how'd you put it? Like pay our next bill to keep it kind of keep the system running, but that's
Mhm.
more about like survival than like thriving, right?
Right.
The more about the free trade. So okay, if we want to become wealthier, like as individuals, as a nation, kind of go hand in hand, individually, collectively. Free trade is kind of one of those keys.
Yeah.
And so I just think about like, okay, so what's kind of standing in our way in today's world? What kind of prevents us from free trade? And I mean, just as an individual, always think of like something cost of living. So then like, how
Yeah.
free am I to like trade my money for things that I have when like most people don't have all?
Mhm.
So it's kind of a similar position the US is. The nation is kind of like that, trying to make that pay that next bill, living paycheck to paycheck. It's more about survival than like thriving.
Yeah. And I think sorry, I was just thinking about your comment because it is true where this goes back to one of those things where, and this is my personal opinion. I have yet to do the research to support it completely. I have done research that hints at this. Um, we don't live in a free trade system anymore, and I don't know when we switched, but
More of
my
a
suspicion is it was Reagan era, would be my guess. But we live in a cronyist world now, and this is one of those things, one of those terms they throw around. I don't know if it's officially used, but it's something I use a lot. Cronyism, which is what has happened throughout history when you have basically large entrenched industries buying public systems, buying public institutions specifically. So you have central banks, lobbyist groups. It creates a system kind of like what they have in China and Russia, where your friend, you're wealthy depending on who you know, not what you do.
Mm.
It's who you know, not what you know. And that is something that's very alive and well. I mean, it's something I saw when I was going through my degree path. Um, the kids in my classes who did the best were connected to really influential people. They were,
Hmm.
you know, Chinese transfer students who were connected to the Politburo, or they were people whose parents were bankers or VCs or serial entrepreneurs. They were the ones that got the good gigs because they knew the investment bankers. They knew the people at Goldman Sachs,
They
right?
were the ones that were kind of held most controller power, so to speak.
Yeah.
The word centralization comes to mind, where yeah, it's just kind of a lot of the control within the hands of like the few, or
Hmm.
kind of a centralized system. And so I think about centralization a lot as one of the primary contributors to what we're talking about, the lack of trade and lack of, well, just wealth spread out to the masses. It's more concentrated at the few. And so there's this kind of desire and demand for decentralization and spreading the wealth and power throughout. And I mean, we talk about Bitcoin as being the most decentralized system in existence right now, and that's kind of leading the chart in decentralization.
Well, and that's one of the really interesting things, right? Because, and this is going to spook a lot of people who watch this later. My brother and I were talking because I'm really big into economics. He's really big into political theory, and we had a conversation where he reminded me of one of the key tenets of Leninist communism. So, for people who don't fully understand what communism is, basically modern communism post Lenin created what's called the Vanguard Party, which is the people, the higher up elites who are supposed to start the revolution. And one of the key principles he had is revolution cannot occur until the Vanguard Party controls the financial system through a central bank. And that's exactly what we saw in Russia and what we still see, where there really isn't a bunch of different banks. It's one bank that controls all the other ones.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Hence central bank.
right. We are actually seeing a move. I was talking with Alexander Rudnev on LinkedIn earlier today. We'll see if he responds. I sent him a message. He's a pretty cool guy. But Circle is leaning crypto back towards that centralized cartel. And I wish I felt differently about it because I think stable coins are a big part of the infrastructure of crypto. I think that they're going to do a lot. But
They are. I mean, I kind of see it more short term, right? Because like stable coins are really just like digital dollars, right? And we kind of
mhm,
like the passes of the Genius Act, like uh which yeah, the Genius Act is kind of like stable coins kind of becoming kind of more sign of the law. So stable coins are gaining a lot of traction,
mhm,
but they're really just digital dollars. And it's good for the United States because, well, yeah, they want what's good for the dollar is good for the United States. And
mhm,
all the dollar, well as like all the stable we're talking about are kind of propped up by treasuries. And so when people buy treasuries who support said stable coin, that's also good for the United States, that situation. But I mean, if you think about it, like the dollar is still like losing value. Like the dollar is the most stable
mhm,
um like government controlled currency in the world. Like you don't obviously don't want like third world country where they have inflation of like double digits of like 10 plus 10
right.
plus. But I mean, I'm reminded of someone who's like from Argentina and shows someone who's from a place where, you know, their money is devaluing at an extreme rate where she saves in dollars, but it's like dollars still losing value. It's just a much slower rate.
Mhm.
So I see a point with that's even when we're on stable coins that starts to become a problem and just looked at it like a band-aid solution, honestly.
Well, and that is the crux of it, right? And I got to be careful because I don't want to like call unnecessary criticism, but if you look at the two big stablecoin issuers, right? The big names we hear about Circle for USDC and Tether for USDT, right? Tether, in my mind, had the more diversified reserves.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just short-term treasuries, which are, I've kind of changed my tone on this, but a small amount of treasuries is actually a good idea because they
Yeah.
move things quickly. Uh, but they also had Bitcoin and they had gold and they had other commodities and assets in their treasury that were more stable. I mean, if you look
Yeah.
at gold, one of the longest financial data sets that we have is the price of gold over time. It was stable for like 300 years.
Yeah. And appreciate.
Um, However, current regulation in the EU with MICA and then here in the US with Genius didn't side with Tether. In fact, they threw them out for the world's most licensed stablecoin issuer.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
yeah. Tether hasn't always been so favorable in the public eye. I remember a few years ago, like 2021, they kind of had, they were in some kind of deep water with not necessarily like publicizing their reserves. And so there was actually some fears like in 2021, 2022 that they might essentially eventually start to fade out. But yeah, then they started buying Bitcoin and now they back their stablecoin with Bitcoin,
mhm,
which is actually probably a better way to do it. And yeah, Circle, yeah, Circle's so regulated that it almost is like an extension of the government at this point. It almost is like not that much, but like it is kind of a, especially with the Genius Act now and kind of
mhm.
Circle being stepping into that, you could say that Circle is essentially an extension of the government.
Yeah, 100%. And we got to be careful with how far that goes. But for people who are watching this, I read the Genius Act when it came out. What the Genius Act did at the core is two very important things. There are some other ones that are also very important, including reporting requirements, which are really good. That kind of stuff I support. But the two things that stuck out to me as being the most blatant is it limited reserves to US debt assets, is what it limited to. It
Yeah.
limited it to treasury bills, to repurchase agreements, cash and bank accounts owned by the company. So it really kind of castrated their ability to diversify their reserves, which I think is going to come back to bite them, right?
Right.
Um, and two, it forced a regulation and registration framework on stablecoin issuers that basically makes it so only banks can afford to do it.
Yeah.
Which for anyone, and I don't know how much Tucker Carlson you watch, Brandon Byrne. I don't watch much, but my father turned me on to this, but Tucker Carlson recently talked to Richard Werner, who's the father of quantitative easing. He was the one who created it. Um, in his research, he found that that's pretty common behavior, that because banks actually just create money out of thin air. So all the Keynesian models in his research don't hold water, they don't perform under tests. The only model that performs under tests when it comes to bank is called it's the bank credit theory, where they just create money. But this is something we see all over the place, where over time in the financial in the financial world, it gets to the point where a small number of banks are the only ones who can afford to do business.
Sure.
And that's a very dangerous thing because it creates 2008.
Yeah. Centralization, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, also in the aspect of like 2008, so it's not only like more control and more power, like I was talking about earlier, but it's also like a single point of failure.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the risks of centralization. And with everything how like the US is kind of operating right now and like all that is kind of becoming more centralized. Like it's almost like they're kind of losing control, kind of like having to hold up more control. And so they're passing these legislatures through this one with the Genius Act that kind of continues that trend of centralization. The people, on the other hand, we kind of have demand and desire and something of a movement, if you factor in like Bitcoin, of decentralizing things. And so that's one of the aspects of how like the government and like the people are like at odds right now.
Yeah. And I applaud people for being in the space where they're noticing this. I noticed it 2 years ago, and I'm not trying to like make myself out as the big man on campus. It's just not that at all. It was more of a situation where when I did my first economic analysis, I came to the realization very quickly that I'd been conned. And not so much like the entire system, because capitalism still works. It's still true free market capitalism, I believe, provides more wealth and more
Yeah,
prosperity to more people than any other market in
yeah,
human history.
yeah.
Uh,
Capitalism's not perfect, but the other ones suck even more. So like
there's
everyone, like I hate capitalism. I'm like, have you looked at the other options?
yeah.
Because those are worse.
Again, to quote Sarah Payne, because she's kind of popping off on YouTube right now. Sarah Payne describes it as communism is a non-functioning economic model that's very good at putting dictators in power. It's the only thing it's good at.
Exactly.
Free market capitalism is very, very good at distributing the most wealth to the most people, because when you make something, the forces in free market capitalism say, you made this thing, I'm going to go find you buyers.
Yeah.
And the buyers are going to bid the price until it reaches a point where everyone's satisfied.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so I think living in what we're living in right now, like people don't necessarily feel like that wealth spreading to them. And so that's kind of what they get frustrated at. And so that's why I say I'm like, we're not really living in like true market capitalism as you say right now. Like this isn't really capitalism.
yeah. That's why I call it cronyism. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's a real term, but it's the term I like. And to put it into perspective, I mean, this is something that has happened over and over and over again. Um, it was one of the things that led to the downfall of Rome, for example. It was one of the things that led to the um here's another fun little historical fact to show this. In kind of a cronyist environment, not, or I think other people call it corporate capitalism. Um, all of a sudden, the risk becomes far more dangerous to you than the wealth that will be created by open sourcing your IP, for example. So you get companies that really, really guard their IP, and it actually destroys you over time because eventually people are just going to move on to something else
Yeah.
or they're going to steal it. And that's exactly what happened in the Industrial Revolution. So the UK forever was being very careful. All the guilds and industries there were trying to protect things like the water mills until an enterprising young man who was doing something illegal, probably under the common law system, realized, oh, if I take water mills to the US, I'll make a fortune.
Yeah. New markets, right?
And he did. And because of that untapped demand and the prosperity it created here, you saw this massive leap forward in the US while the UK started to fall further behind.
Mhm.
Um, we see this in police states as well. I mean, Russia and North Korea, sorry. China is a little bit of a different story, but in Russia and North Korea, we see this as well, where you have tons of central planning, like we've said, where they're far more worried about risk, whatever that risk happens to be, than opening up their markets to investment and specifically expanding property rights so more people are motivated to bring everyone up. And they fall behind. I've heard some people say that Russia will be kind of a third world state forever because of how long it's been since, well, they've really never had the opportunity to practice true free market capitalism
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, true. Okay, so all the things we're talking about is like more government control isn't always isn't almost is almost never to the best benefit of the people. And yeah, you kind of brought up the Industrial Revolution, and that's something I reference a lot, especially now because the Industrial Revolution happened maybe about like 20 years or 15 years kind of after the American Revolution, or it's kind of just getting started. That was the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius. And so
Mm.
now Pluto's back in Aquarius last year, from 2024 to 2044, we're kind of almost in this next phase of like industrial revolution. I'm looking at this one a lot more like a digital revolution. And so AI kind of steals a lot of the headlines, but Bitcoin also has a very important role to
Mm.
in this kind of digital revolution. But we're kind of in a similar time period of yeah, government control starting to like wane and people demand their more wealth power. And it's a very interesting time to be alive. Did you say you had something interesting to talk about AI?
Yeah, so for people at home, we were messaging back and forth, and Brandon had asked me last night, it's like, "What are we gonna talk about today?" I'm like, "I don't freaking know." Like, I've been caught up on work, and there wasn't
It's
really
more of a spontaneous.
anything. Right, but there wasn't anything happening in the spaces I look at either. I was like, there's not really any new big world-shattering things happening in crypto, at least from what I can see. China was pretty flat until, like, this week. Um, Things are happening again now, so I have some more fun stuff coming down the line, including one that Brandon and I are going to be doing together. So for anyone who's watching this and wants to see that article, our collaboration project in the future, subscribe to both of us so that you have a chance to see both perspectives.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be great.
However, when I was walking my in-laws' dog this morning, because we're dog sitting this week, I was listening to Market Update by an analyst that I really respect. And he just nonchalantly dropped the bomb saying that MIT has found that 95% of AI firms are not profitable. And then moved on to the next thing. Like it was no big deal that he just said.
I mean, that's not really that surprising. Are you that surprised? Or yeah, why is it so newsworthy?
I'm It's not surprising to me because I had always had that suspicion. Um, and to kind of support that suspicion, when I would talk with my friends in the Bloomberg lab or at on my college campus, we'd get on the subject of AI and they'd say some kind of new headline, I would make a comment and, you know, over 50% of the time, probably 70% of the time after I made the comment, that comment turned out to be true. Like, for example, when OpenAI and Elon Musk were fighting over IBM, I think is what was happening. People were saying, oh, we're going to buy IBM. I turned to my friends and said, mark my words, as soon as someone comes out who can make an AI model cheaper, this whole thing's going to come apart. Then the next day, DeepSeek was announced.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was such an interesting week.
Yeah.
But
And go ahead. Sorry, you were going to say
but no,
something.
it's just like for one thing,
Mhm.
AI is a thing that a lot of us pretty much have access to, right? Like uh,
Mhm.
AI is a thing that you can have like millions of users at the same time and relatively for free. So it's almost like from that perspective, there isn't a lot of like profits or money to be made in AI. And if like if someone is gonna like charge money for it, then there's gonna be someone else who can offer the service of AI for free, pretty much.
And I'm actually going to read a direct quote from this article that
Yeah.
I found because I think it really paints the picture well. But you hit the nail on the head where when you have something that gets commoditized quickly, um, you're going to have a lot of losers and very few winners.
Yeah.
Um, so the way that they put this, and this is from Virtualization and Cloud Review by Dave Bramall, but it says a new report from the MIT Media Labs project NANDA concludes that despite 30 to 40 billion dollars in enterprise spending on generative AI, 95% of organizations are seeing no business return. And it actually gets a little bit worse because specifically what they discovered is an issue that you and I have talked about before, which is wrappers, right? So wrappers, people that are building businesses around API calls to ChatGPT or Claude or DeepSeek, there is money to be made there, but not as much as VCs on LinkedIn would have you believe. Um, in MIT's study, they found out that if you looked at task specific AI companies, only 5% were successfully implemented, which means only 5% made it to profit. Only 20% of them reached the piloting stage where they're actually testing the product. So, and the main thing they keep bringing up is that the companies are just not what they're claiming that their company is going to do is either not possible or it's just not quality. They bring up things like brittle infrastructure, poor data. One thing that I've noticed a lot in AI companies, especially smaller startups, is there's actually no revenue, which this article at Virtualization and Cloud Review actually supported, where these companies, they have pitch decks and they go to VCs talking about all this revenue that they're going to have.
Yeah.
But then you go talk to the customers and the customers say, I don't want this thing.
Right.
Um,
There's not that like product market fit.
no. So instead, it becomes a zombie that keeps sucking up capital and sucking up VC money that is could never be profitable. Um, One of the ones I looked at in my VC class that I can't bring up because we were asked to sign an NDA, but one of the ones that we looked at in class, I realized that there's no market here for this. Uh, and sure enough, it was one of those situations where they created a product that they thought was going to do well and it wasn't doing well, so they slapped AI onto it. And then it got some VC attention, but the underlying product still has no product market. No one wants this.
Just
Uh,
like yeah, exactly. So yeah, you got to make something that people want,
right.
and yeah, if people don't want it, then it's not gonna make money.
Hmm. So that was the whole crux of it. I'm probably going to write up an article on it as I dig more into it and share my thoughts. But
But yeah, it makes sense with the new technology too. It's kind of that you have like a lot of losers, few winners, because I mean it's a big space. A lot of people are kind of testing things, and that makes sense with like a new technology, right? Something's brand new to like humanity, something like AI, and we're really only a couple years into this thing, so
mm,
you still think of AI almost like as in its infancy stages.
right.
Still, probably about like 3 years old at this point. I'd say it was about like that 2022 time where
Mm,
when ChatGPT first came out. So we can think of like AI's now knows how to walk, but now it's still learning how to do other things, and
right.
it'll continue to mature over time. And
Yeah.
as it matures, yeah, we'll see it be able to do more and more stuff. And
Yeah.
there's a fear that comes with that. We're like, oh, what does it do? And then there's like how you implement it into your own life. Like I don't know how much you use ChatGPT or AI things in your own life, but there's adjustment period there to acclimate to it.
Mm. Yeah. And I mean, so I guess kind of a final thought on that for me, at least, because you're right. I use it a lot. It's really good at finding data for me, which I
Yeah.
appreciate. I don't have to look through thousands of articles and databases to find stuff.
Yeah. But you
Um,
figure out that way. At first, you gotta like kind of test it. So in terms of like people wanting it, with the brand new thing, you're like, I don't know, what does it do? How does it work? Do I want it? There's like there's that question you have to answer, like, do I want this?
yeah.
So that takes some time.
Um, I'll tell you one thing though that, and probably this is my biggest takeaway from reading through this MIT review so far. It puts what could be the final nail in the coffin for me of AI is going to run everything. Because you hear this stuff. You hear it on LinkedIn, you hear it on the news, you hear it on YouTube,
Yeah.
wherever, TikTok, where,
And I
oh,
like
AI is going to take your job in X industry. Well, it's not. If 95% of companies that are doing specific task specific things with AI are not profitable, then your job's not at risk. You know, if only 5% of AI accounting firms are making actual money, accountants are going to be okay, is
yeah.
the point I'm trying to make here because it's
Oh yeah.
just, it shows what I've been suspicious of, which is people just do not, they want a human, not a robot.
Exactly. And no, it's like it's not that different from like the internet, right? Like the internet changed a lot of things and probably rendered some jobs like obsolete, but it like created other things. So it's like yeah, yeah. So it's not as taking everyone's job as you're seeing in like some headlines. Yeah, I agree that those headlines are maybe a little clickbaity.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we're running short on time. This is a shorter one today because I am short on time. But Brandon, do you want to share any final thoughts? We have 4 minutes left before we're probably going to call it.
Oh yeah. I can give maybe a little extra.
Yeah,
Yes.
go for it. Go for it. Plug
Um,
away.
So yeah, I was talking about August. August is such an interesting month because I mean we had a lot of things going on the first couple of weeks, especially like August 8th to August like 12th.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're having like a wild time. Were you in Europe during that time?
Yes, and I was nervous that we were going to get jumped because of all the protests that were going on because of the trade deal. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But
Thankfully,
yeah.
indeed. So now we're kind of now we're going into a time where it's going to be like this Virgo takeover. We actually have two Virgo new moons, which pretty rare. I mean, you get two new moons in the same sign every like few years or so, but yeah, just kind of weird and interesting. But yeah, the second, so we have the first one of those on Friday in 2 days, like the first day of Virgo season. And with the Virgo season, I always think about like back to school season. It's kind of like Virgo as a sign is pretty like organized and kind of
Mhm.
detail oriented. So it's like get your paper, get your pencils, get your whatever, all your supplies you need. Um, and then there's also like a health component too. Like it's also about like what do you need like mentally to get ready? What do you need like physically? How do you, like take care of your body and things like that. So um, yeah, we'll probably see like some health things come up over the next 6 weeks. Yeah, then the next one in September is going to be an eclipse, and so we get into eclipse season. Eclipse season happens every 6 months. It's kind of like the craziest 2 week period out of every. Well, yeah, six. You kind of see a lot of
Yeah.
like you kind of just see like a lot of like big changes, like major beginnings, major endings, and just a lot of like faded things. Like something
Mm.
eclipse season a little like kind of happens whether you consent or not. It's just kind of like you're along for the ride. So it's a little volatile but exciting at the same time. And so that's what September is going to be like eclipse season. And actually, yeah, Saturn will go back into Pisces September 1st. And so we're kind of going to start going into this back towards like March and even like 2024, 2023 in terms of Saturn to Pisces. So we have all these new planets and new signs, and it's kind of like the whole new world thing that we've been experiencing in 2025. But we're going to have Saturn go back into its sign it's been in for the last few years, as well as Uranus and Neptune in the next few months. So we kind of get a little bit of a break of this whole new world things and start to go into old world things
Mm.
before all those planets go back into their new signs for the next several years next year, starting in like February. So overall, I do like the astrology of October, November, December. It's really good like way to close out the year.
Mm. Hopefully, it'll be a much needed break, considering the greatest generation infrastructure, the quote on current world order, is rapidly falling apart around us. I think we could all use some breathing room. So
Yeah, I think it'll be nice for that.
perfect. Well, I mean that we're at time, but do you want to make any final plugs for your Substack or anything else
Yeah,
coming
I
up?
mean, yeah, I'm publishing today's Wednesday is my newsletter day, so I'm publishing every week on Wednesday for the Money Now That newsletter. Kind of being a little more astrology focused these days. So I'm an astrologer who helps you become wealthy, and yeah, Tyler writes some good interesting stuff too. So, what about you?
Um, yeah, I mean, biggest things, like I said, we are going to be doing a collaborative article. Brandon and I will be doing one on hard money. That'll be coming out sometime soon, whenever I actually have the chance to put the outline together.
Indeed,
Um,
what's the part like?
and then some people have noticed this already. I am going to start adding some more content to the newsletter around blockchain deposit insurance company. So I'm super stoked for that. Hopefully, I'm even gonna have a chance to bring Jeffrey on here for one of these live podcast episodes. He's a really cool guy, but he'll be learning more about that very soon. I've talked about it already, but we're going to dive real deep into it over the next year. So,
Exciting stuff. Have a good rest of August. Pleasure to catch up with you, Tyler.
yeah,
We'll talk again soon.
yeah.
Uh, happy Virgo new moon.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Talk to you later, Brandon.
Bye. Have a good one.